am excited. You see it here right now. Yasmin Abdelhadi, we're speaking to her today. She's Greek, Italian, and Egyptian. I am so excited to have everybody meet her. We have recently been collaborating, and I have known Yasmin for a long, long time. It's been a good decade plus.
Yep.
I'm really excited to introduce in this next episode of Mixed Race Women's Collective, Yasmin Abdelhadi, to share her story. We are both know each other from Edison, but her story starts way before that. And I'm really excited for you to get to know today her childhood, her belonging, some of her greatest moments, I'm sure, of celebration and also conflict, and what it looks like to be a mixed race woman and where that's brought her today and what she's up to today. So we're going to cover all of that in 55 minutes or less before she keeps on living her best life and going live with all the lovely people in the world. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to Yasmin. You have anything to say, Yasmin?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. I just love this group. This idea, Mita, is so needed. We all need to just like learn from one another. It's just all love, all community. And the fact is that we're all mixed in some way, shape, or form. So the fact is that we need to make sure that we hear each other's stories, right? Like it's so important to connect. It's so important to understand where someone is coming from, how they grew up, and where they are at right now in life, especially this year when it's so needed to have more unity and community than ever before. So I'm so grateful that this group was created. I'm so grateful that you're calling to light that so many people are of mixed race. And it just goes to show you, like, you know, we're all so much more alike than different. And this is evidence.
My goodness. And we could just drop it right there. We could just drop the mic right there and be like, okay, great. Thanks for watching. That's beautiful and perfect. And actually, that's why I was so excited to speak with you once we chatted a little bit about this before. If you're watching right now and you know us, or you have questions for Yasmin as you get to know her story, feel free to like drop comments in the chat. You know, we have a few viewers or ask questions or say hi. We have our Edison ties in common, as we mentioned, as well as our mixed race. But you know, this might already have been your answer in what you just said, but why, you know, it sounds like that is why you agreed to talk today. So, you know, why don't you just start us off from the beginning of your life?
Yeah.
A little bit of your life and how it is a self-expression of a mixed race woman. So where does your story begin? Tell us about yourself.
I guess my story begins in 1986 when I was born. I was born in Jersey City, so a very mixed culture, diverse environment to grow up in, which I'm so grateful for, because I think that set the tone for me really understanding the uniqueness in each person and really just empathizing with people different than I was. That's first. So second, so my dad was Egyptian Muslim, and my mom is Greek and Italian, raised Catholic. And then my mom's family, so my aunts, married my uncles who are Greek Orthodox. So right off the bat, there was a lot of mixed culture, mixed religions, mixed views. And so as I was growing up in Jersey City, like my mom and dad, like we grew up like primarily without my aunts in the picture, as well as my uncle, and neither my grandmother and my grandfather. Like they rarely came to visit us. So we identified much more with the Egyptian side. We fasted, we celebrated Eid, we ate the food that was more like Egyptian based. And then we would see my Greek and Italian side like a sprinkle. So
can I ask you right there? It's so beautiful you're sharing this. What was that like for you? Like growing up immersed in, you know, this in Egyptian culture in Jersey City, and you know, in the faith of Islam, right? And also knowing you have this Greek Catholic, you know, part of you in your body, but it sounds like it was a sprinkle. Like what was that like?
Yeah. So, you know, religion wasn't like heavily pushed on us. There were times where it was brought up, And like before kindergarten, I went to like Islamic school.
Oh.
And so you had to like recite the Quran, and you had to like make sure you're memorizing and all of that other stuff. So all I remember of that time was that I didn't recite something specific. And I remember like having like the ruler slapped on the back of my hand. And so my mom at that point said, no, she's not going to that school. So that was one of like the initial like experiences that I remember. But what I think is wild about that time is that I grew up with more of the Egyptian side with my dad's brothers, like, you know, living in the house occasionally. My mom and dad owned a whole apartment, like a 3-apartment complex. And my dad owned a restaurant. He owned a restaurant. So that was our life. That was our little like microcosm of life.
Wow.
And growing up in Jersey City. So of course we were surrounded by our Egyptian relatives and traveled to Egypt as kids and ate Egyptian food. So it wasn't pushed, the religion aspect, because my dad was like faithful, but not like crazy.
Yeah.
You know, for like a lack of a better term. He wasn't like obsessed over it.
Right.
It was just not discussed so much. It was mentioned, but like very light.
So yeah, and thanks for sharing that like picture of all that. How do you feel? So you're talking about, you lived in Jersey City. You're born and raised in Jersey City, right? And you're here in Jersey City neighborhood. How do you feel that upbringing and that your life in Jersey City, and I want you to let us know for how long you were there. Like, how did that impact? How do you see that impacted your identity and your mixed race understanding of yourself thus far? You're walking us through the timeline, right? So thus far, what do you think?
Yeah. So, I mean, I was in Jersey City until I was 13. We moved to Edison at 13 when I was in the middle of 9th grade. So I had a very clear understanding of the environment, you know, the not so good parts and the very good parts. It was very diverse, like I said. So it really, again, set the stage for what I saw as quote unquote normal. And so when I moved to Edison and it was a suburb, first off, I wasn't like that way of life. It was different than how we were growing, how we were raised, and just the types of people, right? Like what their backgrounds were, what they were used to, you know, the people's skin tone, their culture. So it was just a different vibe. Like, you know, we were in inner city, like public school, same thing when we came to Edison, but it was just like a different tone. Like I didn't have grass, like to like play recess, right? Like it was concrete jungle, and it was, you know, you go to the library or the corner store, like before or after school, or like you hang out with your friends and you could just walk down the block. So it was just a different energy, I think.
Yeah. And it sounds like a real big piece of that, like you said, is the energy of a city.
Right.
You know, and the diversity and like, you know, kind of sometimes the roughness around the edges of the city.
Yeah.
You know, every time, you know, I was born and raised in New Jersey, in Edison from the start, but I was born in actually New Brunswick. And even New Brunswick, a smaller, now growing slightly larger city, right? Always gave me the feel of a certain, like a urban feel, roughness.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, even going to New York, same kind of thing on a bigger scale. And then you come to this place in Edison, potentially more family feeling, oriented, fun, friendly. Speaking of feeling, if you hear kids screaming in the school, because I work at a school. So, you know, please excuse and enjoy the symphony. But what about, I'm curious, given that we have this Edison piece in common too.
Yeah.
All the beauty, you know, the good, bad, ugly, you know, what could you share about what it was like to show up at Edison High School, which was actually at the time ranked probably amongst the most like highly diverse schools.
Yes.
Public schools, like great for education, especially when we were there. What was that like?
Yeah, so definitely at first, obviously a little out of place. You know, no one wants to transfer schools in 9th grade. Huge adjustment. But I also, I'm so grateful that Edison was as diverse as it was. You know, I got the exposure of people from different backgrounds. And again, you know, children of immigrants that I could say, you know, my dad does this. And you're like, your dad does that too. So it was very comforting, and it wasn't like a bad transition to like come to a place like Edison where it was a little bit bigger and not so homogenous with like one type of people. So yeah, it was definitely like good. It was just the energy was different, right? Like taking a school bus and like, doing things like that, oh, you had to be part of the after school clubs and like, just things like that was just different than what I had grown up to like see like before 13.
Yeah. And I love that you keep bringing it back to energy. I think, I think life is energy. We are all energy. We're all made up of particles of energy, right? And it sounds like, in the energy between the city and the suburb, it sounds like that was a defining context, a factor in your life, like going from the city to the suburbs.
Yeah.
Right, to this new school and like you're on a school bus. It looks different. I get that.
Yes.
And where do you feel along the way, whether it was in Jersey City or at Edison High School or in some other place, in a church, in a mosque, or somewhere else at a family gathering, did you feel like you first got it that you're like, I am mixed race? Like, do you I have and the thing is that not everybody, you said like we all are to some extent, but not everybody
right
that way.
And yeah.
That's okay
yeah.
too, right? But like we're, because I think about, I guess I'm asking because I'm asking myself that. And when I'm asking doing these interviews, is that I'm in my own self-discovery too. I wonder, I remember growing up, and I think for me, it might have been like kind of probably, I think I knew elements of like, I'd see my hair on my arms, and I knew that like people would be like, are you bilingual? And I'd be like, well, I guess I understand a little bit of Spanish. And then like, I knew that I had a family in India. And I think making sense of it, like I encompass this richness and culture and history of my both families that are Puerto Rican and Catholic and Indian Muslim. So we have religions in common too, right?
Yeah.
It really hit me in high school. So I'm wondering if it was like that for you, or sooner. I think I might have been 13 or 14. So
I think it was definitely like the preteen years that I really was like just observing the people around me, even in Jersey City, right? Like even if there was like a big Egyptian community, it wasn't like we were part of the Egyptian community, like full on, like we weren't fully immersed in that. Right. As when we, I identify more with the Greeks, I'm not fully immersed. So I saw that very quickly, like as a young kid, like my dad was Egyptian, but he wasn't like, the typical, like you would think, like, imagine. And just, we saw more of the cultural, but like my mom still like knows how to speak Greek. So like when my grandmother was present, it was Greek being spoken, or, certain things were brought up that was like, oh, something else. I'm part of something else too. So I think it was early on that I was aware of the diversity, like in my background.
And that's beautiful. I mean, I guess when I hear it, I'm like, oh, that's beautiful. And I also let's be real, it's beautiful. And it's not always, right. It can also get tricky. And, and I have appreciated you because it's not, I see you have, I know that the things that you do in life that we'll be talking about, soon and later on too, but is like, I know that you've developed and honed in a keen sense of self-awareness, right? And I see that in how you're speaking. I've talked to different people and everybody's at a different place with it. Some people are like, I haven't really looked at my identity mixed race. That's not a problem. I see that you've looked a lot at, I know you develop yourself. I know you and what you do as an entrepreneur, you do that. Where do you see for yourself, like high school happened, right? High school was happening. Can you take us a little bit next in your chronology? Like where, do you feel like, you could tell us a little bit about college and beyond, like, did you ever have any defining moments or stories that came into play that had to do with race that had you feel like, ooh, smack in the face? Or like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever,
Yeah. I would say, like, I'll rewind back to elementary, like in Jersey City time, where, I think I shared this with you, Amita, that 9/11 happened when we were in Jersey City, and my dad owned a restaurant. A lot of like teachers would come, a lot of like local business owners. Everybody knew my dad. He was super friendly in that aspect. And then 9/11 hit, and there was a lot of prejudice. There was a lot of hate and, you know, people that broke our front door and people threw eggs and tomatoes and people that stopped coming. So it was very clear that something had shifted, and something shifted in my dad too. So that he had to hold on to his religion, right? Because out of fear and out of this like hate that was in the world. So that was like a catalyst for us as a family. I would also say going into high school, like when I was in AP classes and like honors classes, you could definitely see I would say like the typical race, like in those areas that were in those types of classes. So it was kind of like I was still like an outsider because, right, in Edison, there was a heavy, right, and you know this, there was a heavy like Indian population, Pakistani population, Asian population. So just to like not be fully part of it, but like all my friends were. So it was like, okay, like I still didn't fit in. Then fast forward to college, I went to NYU for undergrad. So again, a pretty diverse school, and I'm in the city. So that's a whole other like world. Same thing, like pre-med, chemistry, like bio. I was surrounded by like, you know, different groups of people, but I was still like an outsider. I had never met anyone that was like, oh, I'm also like Egyptian, Greek and Italian, or like Egyptian and this, you know, it was interesting to see, which is fine. Like, you know, I always embrace like the different, because I wanted to like learn other people's cultures, and I wanted to like learn what made them tick and what their family life is looking like, because at the end of the day, like I was seeing things that were similar,
right,
and then also different at the same time.
I think that's so like great that you are sharing this, and thanks for like that vulnerable sharing and eye-opening thing to look at. That it's like, you know, I hear that, right? I hear that, you know, this thing that we're talking about, that, you know, looking around you, right? In Edison High or in other college, when you go to college, NYU, in really diverse places like New Jersey, New York, with really melting pots, and still, you're like, yeah, you could. I'm sure you could have found a whole load of Egyptians, right?
Right.
A whole lot of Muslims, and that's fantastic. You could have found a whole load of people that identified as Greek and Italian and Orthodox or Catholic, but that feeling of maybe not like that fewer, or at some point me feeling like nobody gets it.
Right.
I think,
or even trying to figure out, right? Like I remember in college, I tried going to like the Hellenic Heritage Club.
Ooh.
And I'm just remembering this now.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, you know, I should probably like be around Greek people, like, you know, to see like what's up. And I still like, you know, I didn't have that in common, where I was going to Greece every summer with my family and I didn't speak Greek, and, you know, it wasn't the same. And so being mixed, like that's the beauty of it. You're not fit into like one bubble. And whereas even in interfamily, like my cousins compared to myself, my cousins are like, you know, and my sisters and my brother will say the same thing. Like there's so much more Greeky and Greek than we are, right? And like my Egyptian cousins are so much more Egyptian than we are, where we're like bits and pieces of each.
I feel like what you said so resonated in terms of like what it looks like to and what it feels like and sounds like to be a mixed race human being. And I love, you know, what you just said with that, like, you know, the interesting part of this, you said, you know, what it looks like to belong and fit in, and never really fully fit in anywhere, but rather it's like I have pieces of me or parts of me or that fit in different places. For you to be, I get that, for you to be looking at Hellenic like organizations and thinking like, where can I like exercise my Greek? Almost take cues from the other Greek people and be like, oh, this is what Greek people do? Because you get that you're Greek, and then, but not fully, and that is not wrong, but not like, you know, it's genetics and it's culture. And I have recognized that too, like as being somebody who would be like, I love to dance. Let me go to do salsa, merengue, bachata. Anybody can do that. And I found myself connecting with Latinos. Also, when I moved to LA later in life, I found myself being like, oh, educated Latinos. I agree with what you said in Edison, you know, everybody, public school systems, there's a larger discussion around it, but I did feel a little bit like in my classes, I remember one like other woman young woman that was Colombian, and then there was like me, like Puerto Rican on my side, and I didn't really feel like I had many other like Latinos around, and I mean, I found a lot of other Indians, but again, that's different.
A different vibe, yeah.
We connect, and we're different. Like we're all unique human beings.
Right.
And I also love that in that analysis and that sharing, you're saying that being mixed, like there's also, that's the beauty of it, right? It can feel like a struggle bus sometimes. It can feel like, especially growing up as kids, and we all do, right? We all, I know folks watching might be like, what's all this like hoorah about being mixed? We all struggle with fitting in and belonging. And it's just, I think the point that it sounds like we're highlighting here is that, and it is especially, if not even more so tricky for something that is, you know, it might be mixed race, and that's kind of like when you feel like you have your home, you create one, and that was the collective, to connect with other mixed race people, to see what we have in common, and to be real, like it sounds like we do have a lot of these experiences in common. You said, you know, you don't fit into one bubble. It made me think of the standardized tests. It made me think of, like, you legit, it's like, do I put down Hispanic, Latino, Puerto Rican? Right. Do I put down South Asian? Am I South Asian? And then it's like, do I write it in? Do I not even bother? Multiracial? Okay, maybe. But it's like, why I got to define myself? Okay. This is for statistics. Anyways, right?
That's so true. It's always like the question, and it's like, it's never the same. Like at what point you are in your life when you were taking those, like, and I've taken many standardized tests, like where were you mentally at that place? And I was like, it's none of them can be I can't be put in a bubble. So I don't know. It's other. That's
so beautiful. And other can be beautiful. And and that's the point too, right? Like I'd assert that other is beautiful because it takes somewhere new, right? And so with that being said, you know, I wonder, where has other taken you, you know, on your journey? I see that I myself, like I said, I connected to Indian food and culture and garbas and Edison growing up, and I connected to like Latin culture and flavor, and dated people speaking Spanish, and went to study in Spain. And I always felt like I went on a personal journey of like of roots trips, going to Oman, going to Spain. And I think I recognize very vulnerably that I have been looking to kind of like, you know, I think I always struggled a little bit to like define myself as something, my identity. What about you? Like, where has this taken you? Where has this other taken you? How present has it been for you or not growing up, you know?
That's a good question. I'd love to go back and go to the countries where my grandparents grew up and like see like where my roots really started, because how my family, like my parents got divorced, that played into a role of really, I don't want to say avoidance. I would say like just the Egyptian side, it was kind of like estranged, right? So that whole aspect, you know, of course, great memories, but it's not like, oh, I need to go back and like really like get to the bottom of like my Egyptian side. And then as far as the Greek, because it was a little later in life, that, you know, I was more around Greek relatives. I like, for me personally, I would go to Greece right now to like go and experience the land and like learn the language, but not for the sake of like knowing my roots. It's more like to appreciate the culture that I saw my family celebrate here, so that I can understand like where my grandmother grew up and where my uncles who were born there, how they grew up. And same thing like for my father's side, you know, like I think it's a wonderful and humbling thing to see how other people, a family or not family, but just cultures in general and religions and all of that stuff, how they like live their day to day and like what motivates them and what kind of like what do they embody. So that's where I'm at. Like I love just like exploring and just seeing people and just learning how people tick. And I think it was rooted because I was mixed race. And that's why I feel like I can empathize more with people from different backgrounds. And, you know, especially in this year when hot topics were being brought up that had been a long time coming that needed to be brought to the light, and not just for fad, but for like real, like let's really heal some deep wounds that have existed, because it's present in every single person's background. So I think that's where I'm at, like just understanding like people, everybody's individual, but we all have like pieces of us that are so mixed, and we're all just wanting, you know, we all have a sign on our heads that say, you know, make me feel special. And the way that we do that is by listening, right? Hearing people's story and, you know, understanding where they're coming from.
Yeah. 100%. And you know, and that's why we're here today. And I'm really grateful that, you know, you are sharing your story, right? And you are, you know, I'm grateful that you've said yes to share with us, because that in turn is like a platform for you, right? To really share, and we get to know you and listen, and in turn we get to listen to each other. And I'm on this mission right now to really have a lot of mixed race people, specifically women, because that's what I can also relate to on that level of in ascribing to a gender, right? On what it might look like to heal deep wounds and also heal the world and show up in the world. And I love what you said about really empathizing with people from different backgrounds, because it's like you already do, right? You already kind of have to, right? Like we are raised to like having to kind of get it, like Greek, you know, like Greek, you know, Egyptian, Puerto Rican, Indian, like we're already born like negotiating these different things, right? And I'm wondering, you know, in negotiating these different boundaries and mixed race, like as mixed race people, I wonder, and I want to ask you, because you particularly have a situation with me. Not only do we have the, you know, the Catholic upbringing and the Muslim upbringing, with different levels of, you know, connection to religion and like the East and the West, you have siblings. We do not pretend that they don't exist, because we know we love them and they exist, and we love you. And if you watch this now or the replay, we love you. So I want to take this opportunity, you know, maybe we'll eventually talk to them too, especially the women, right? Yeah. That's really up to that, to them too. But you know, to whatever you'd like to speak on that, I'd be curious about what you might have noticed, like to the point of getting it, right? I don't know about you, but I have felt like, I think I have a particularly strong bond with my brothers. I'm still learning more about them every day, but personally, it's like they're one of the few people in the world that really get what it was like growing up. And I mean, hopefully all siblings get that you can look to your siblings for that. Right. And especially when you got mixed race going on and mixed and faith going on. So I'm wondering, what did that look like for you? If you want to shout out your siblings, your family, and if there's anything particular about comparing the women experience to not, because I know I felt that too. I love my brothers, but I saw some sister and some lady that was different than some male treatment. So let's not put the women in the mixed race women, right? Yeah. What did that look like for you?
So 100%. So I remember as kids, Kiki and I, we would go to my grandmother's and she would watch us.
And Kiki is your sister who's 2 years younger than you?
2 years younger.
1 or 2 years. Yeah. 1 year younger? Yeah.
A year and 7 months to be exact.
So the same grade in school. So much love to Kiki. Yeah. Go ahead.
So we definitely saw like the female being like the caretaker, and you do the cleaning up and you do the cooking and you take care of the house. And it would be like boy cousins there. And it was like, no, you, like to us, like we would have to do the cleanup. And at a very young age, I was definitely a rebel. So like, that still persists to this day. And I was like, why do we have to clean up? That's ridiculous. And I think that was on both sides, whether it was Egyptian, where they were the caretakers and they were doing the cooking. I mean, we would go to Egypt and like the women were in the kitchen and cleaning the house, and the men were like sitting and like drinking tea, and not really involved in like doing things. And the same thing, like, even like growing up here, like seeing my grandmother, my grandfather, she was the caretaker. So culturally speaking, very similar on both sides, where it's that woman that runs the household, does the cleaning, the cooking, the children, all of that stuff, where the man kind of like sits back. What else? I would say like it was very, again, like my family, I went through, my parents divorced when I was 18. So there was a definite like
a disconnect.
Yeah, like a schism, like in what we were dealing with, right? So my sister and I, we saw more of the Egyptian side. Kiki and I, we saw more of the Egyptian side. And then, she has her own opinions about what, and her own views, her own like version of what we exactly grew up with. And then when my mom was divorced and, we were more with our Greek side, it was my younger sister, Sophia, who was able to like go and do the Greeky things, like go to Goya, and like she speaks Greek and she took a little bit of Greek in school. Wow. So, and like my brother and her are baptized, whereas Kiki and I are not. So it was definitely like a difference as far as like completely how we were being brought up, and culturally, and, race and religion and all of that stuff, what was being told to us. Wow. Yeah, but at 18, I mean, I was very cognizant of like what was happening. Like the separation, like how I knew things were going to be different compared to how we were growing up.
Wow. I think that's really, thanks for sharing, because that's really remarkable to think about. Maybe it happens and looks like that everywhere, unfortunately, like divorce is, I've not experienced it, right? I haven't lived it like intimately, even in my household, but like I can imagine it's kind of a bittersweet thing. Like obviously it sucks, and then there's some good of it also too. Further,
right?
But that being said, it sounds like that as the family shifted, right? As the family shifted, it's like so did your views, right? And so did your upbringing, what was being told to you, right? In terms of like what's important in life. Obviously, if you're going to run the show, she's going to be sharing what she knows, and if you're going to, he's going to be sharing what he knows, right? So with that being said, though, and again, if you're open to that, looking at that, it sounds like you're clear that like, okay, that shifted a path. At least like Kiki and I were raised this way, and then you have two other siblings that were like experiencing Greek and Catholic. Well, we didn't. It was like you got Egyptian Muslim influence.
Right.
What's that like for you now, present day? I know many things have happened since then, right? Regarding your father and stuff. So what's it like for you now in terms of personally with that?
So you want the real raw truth?
Oh, the real truth.
Okay.
You can't handle the truth.
Okay. So because I saw when right before my parents divorced, I'll set it up. Right, religion played a role in my dad's life because 9/11 had happened. He was holding on to religion, and so he was talking a lot out of fear and anger, right? And so that shifted, right? Like what my view of a man in Muslim world was acting like, especially towards my mother again. So that was a whole different issue. So when I saw that, and then the same thing on the Catholic and the Greek Orthodox side, right? Like my aunts like pushing me to get baptized, or like my grandmother in my ear, like, you have to believe this. I personally am not, I don't ascribe to any organized religion because I saw it separate more than brought people together. And again, anybody that's out there that needs religion as a faith, as a way to have hope, as a way to congregate, to like, have love or feel loved, that's fine. But for me personally, I'm more interested in like the soul work and the inner being, and what's right, like what's your soul like really wanting to peel back the layers of what holds you back. So that is really like my spirituality is much more on the front page than any like religion. Of course, I appreciate, right? And I appreciate the stories and the similarities more than the differences. But for me personally, I just saw it divide more. And then I bring it to the outside world, right? In the world that we live in. And that has caused so much division. And I don't want any part of it. I don't want to be part of something that says like, I'm right and you're wrong. Like, because we are all right in our own realities, and we're all right according to what we believe. So yeah.
I think that's so 100% courageous of you to really own your truth, right? And what you've experienced and again, like you said, your reality and your experience,
exactly.
Your soul, and like what calls to you. And I feel you, and I really get, it's so funny, and this is why we share and connect and share and go back and forth, because for me, yes, it's clear religion has been such a structure for people, and divisive for people, and oh, that pains me, because the ultimate intention, hopefully, is this level of higher purpose, light, soul, God, blessings, universe, right? And it's so funny because you're right. Like, it's tough if it's bringing us apart. It's not. It doesn't sound like it's doing what it's meant.
Right.
When it brings us together, that's gold. And I feel really fortunate, and I get it doesn't go that way for everyone. But when I do think about what my Catholic and Muslim have in common, it's their belief in that one God.
Right.
If you want to get them sitting down and talking about Jesus and talking about Muhammad, we got a different story. Like, it's going to be like that's cool. And they know that, right? I love that, but they're open. They're open, and we're open too. And to speak vulnerably to what you said too, like, I get, and this might lead us into something else. I'm going to ask you about relationships and interracial relationships. And I know too, because we are products of interracial relationships. We are products of interfaith relationships.
Yeah.
And God bless, universe bless, right? Like, those things take us on a journey to where we are now. And I feel blessed that I have always felt so enriched by that, because that has had me be soulful, faithful, and my parents have God in common. Okay. I tell you that they have God in common, right? And it takes something to look past the differences and go, okay, well, we're all, it doesn't matter whether you say Bismillah or whether I give the sign of the cross, like, we're going to pray. Right. And that, when I see that's beautiful. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what the world needs. Right. Right. That coexistence. Right. And it's not always easy. And growing up for me, there was times it's like, going to church. Oh man. Oh wait, now we're going to Jamaat Kana, specifically Ismaili Muslim Mosque. Oh wait, but I got homework to do. Oh wait, Tupperware is going to church this weekend, and they're going to go to church and not mosque. Wait, hold up. Like anything, right? Like, if you're for those listening, that might not apply to you, but if somebody likes golfing and somebody likes bacon, and you're going to be like, it started to feel a little bit of a tug of war between mommy and daddy, and we're like, like Puerto Rican and Indian. And maybe for you, did you ever feel like it was like Greek and Egyptian, or like Catholic Muslim? Did you ever feel like you had to choose? Like, or if you did, you would be choosing one parent over another? Did you ever feel like Sometimes I think I did. And I think that's not what they ever intended to mean or do, but I think my developing brain was like, do I? I don't want to. I think that's definitely, like, it depends. I think it also depends on the relationship between the man, your father and mother. Like, what role did they play in the household? Who was the more dominant one? Who was setting the rules? Who was leading? Who was the breadwinner? I also think that also determines who kind of called more of the shots. My father had a very much more, I don't want to say domineering, but more like stronger voice in saying, my kids are going to practice Islam. Whereas my mom backed off on that aspect, and they didn't really have the discussion before they had kids as far as like, what were we going to raise them? It wasn't really brought up because my mom had me when she was 20. And so
that was, you know, it was naive. It was not discussed. But I definitely think that played a role in like what, you know, not a matter of like what we were choosing, but it's true. Like we were surrounded by more Egyptian family. So of course, like we were seeing that. We were with, you know, cousins when we were in Egypt. Of course, we're gonna like do what they do, and like that's it.
And I feel you right there too, because it's such an important thing. You see, you know, we talk about nature and nurture, right? And like nurture, like I, growing up, heard Spanish more ultimately. And Puerto Rico more, because logistically, physically, geographically, Puerto Rico is a 3.5, 4 hour flight from here. Going to India, I mean, we had little India in our own Edison town, but going to India and being really in India is like, you know, 15 hours on a plane. We didn't do it as often. And, you know, my parents made the choices they made, and we did too. And it's so interesting to say that, right? Because obviously when we go to Puerto Rico for Christmas, we are going to be at midnight mass. There is nowhere else we're going to be except welcoming Jesus Christ on the birth of the Savior. And that's great. And I appreciate that, right? That is the true Holy Spirit of Christmas deep down, right? And you know, it's just, you know, it's so interesting, right? It's I find it fascinating, and I'm like really grateful. I'm like, oh my gosh, like thanks for taking us there and looking at that, because not many people I know actually can speak to this. My brothers can, and you can, and y'all, you can, the laddies can, right? But I don't know, at least not yet, other people that can speak to that. And that happens to be personally a big part of our mission, bringing an identity, the faith piece.
Yes.
That being said, though, we talk faith, we talk religion, and I know we have about 10, 12, 13 minutes left. I wanted to know for you, to what extent you want to share or not. I also do relationship, right? Like I'm in a relationship too, and I explore my relationship. And for me, like I have dated people that share like a mixed race, like that are Puerto Rican or that are Indian or neither. And being mixed race in a relationship is, you know, a thing, right? Yeah. So to what extent you ever want to talk about that or not, I'm curious, what have you noticed about yourself owning your mixed race when it comes to relationship or friendships? Yeah,
it's quite interesting because I'm with my boyfriend. He's Peruvian, and he was born there, and he came here when he was 16.
Wow.
So, right, like the irony that I would be in a relationship with somebody that is also an immigrant to this country. So I find myself really going back to past, because he, as a male immigrant, like never has met my father. My father passed away several years ago. To not have ever met, questions what he was like. And so I then start questioning, what was my father like really like, you know, outside of the context of like what I thought at the time. So it's been interesting. And I've been with my boyfriend now, you know, the first couple of years, I would say on off, but 10 years, that's a long time. So how it plays out is that we've grown together, and we've also been able to see each other's culture. So like when I go to his household, heavy Catholic, heavy Peruvian, like everybody speaks Spanish, everybody's eating Spanish food. What do you mean you don't eat meat? Like it's ridiculous. So like just the whole vibe. So it's so interesting. Like I've always, I guess, been attracted to men that were not one.
Cultures.
Yeah, like just like cultural or like, you know, flavorful, you know, like, you know, it didn't have to be multi.
Flavorful.
Yeah.
That is key. I also experienced growing up, I could meet someone, and eventually it was important to me to be able to connect on cultural identity.
Right.
Whatever that culture is. If you're an avid skier and that's your culture, then let me in, right? Like, but, you know, that might be a stretch, and that's fine too. That's hobbies. But like, I know what really like got my wheels turning, and really, like, you know, was like the buzz for me was like, tell me about your culture. Do you speak a language? Do you speak other languages? You know, what religion, faith, you know, like food, like, you know, people who are connected to that. And it sounds like you get it, because I think it's so beautiful what you said. It's like right here, you know, we're talking in the United States. People could be having this conversation in any country right now, but in the United States, we, you know, we're all immigrants, right?
Right.
Like we're all immigrants. I mean, and the native, shout out to the Native Americans, right? Like there's a certain level of roots and what's mixed and not mixed. So I should say not all of us, but many of us are. Like vast more majority, you know, initially we have, even if it's our 6th or 7th or 8th generation back or something.
Absolutely.
So it's just, it's so interesting that you're like, that I have found that attractive too, where you're like, okay, like has an immigrant story, right?
Yeah.
And so speaking of, you know, an immigrant story and a story, like what is, you know, where has the story brought you today? Where has the story brought you today in terms of, you know, we shared about everything. We've talked about personally, we talked about family, we've talked about relationship, you know, and your siblings, right? Say anything if you want, like about friendship, right? Or anything like that. But like, I'm really curious now in your networks and your career, like where has this brought you now? You were at NYU. I didn't catch it. You studied what? And now I know it's been a bit since college. Do you want to share what it's been like for you now and like what you're creating in life? Because I think creative people out there that are doing things, and I think mixed race identity is particularly like allows us. It's like we've been creating and reading between the lines,
all of our lives. So after NYU, I graduated and then did a master's at Rutgers in biomedical sciences, and then I did a doctorate in physical therapy at Seton Hall University. So all throughout that, you know, I made wonderful friends, mixed backgrounds, etc. But I also saw the need for diversity, like in my friend group, in my circle, in my workplace, like it needed to be diverse. Obviously from the background of being mixed race, but also because like it was important to, again, like I'm all about just what's your story? Like what's your life journey so far and what are you hoping to like learn? So with that said, I graduated PT school and I absolutely love what I do as a physical therapist. I work in outpatient. So I'm with people, I talk to people, I hear their stories as I'm treating them and helping them on their healing journey.
How do you think your mixed race, if at all? I know it's, you know, you have a lot of background. You have this extensive, and you know, NYU, Rutgers background, education, this Jersey education. So what about, you know, you mentioned about being able to connect with people. What else do you think your different cultures and background might provide you in your current role as, you know, in PT, if anything?
I think, you know, just it all goes back to empathy. You know, it really is just humbling to hear, you know, like for me as a clinician, I want to find out someone's lifestyle, right? And so their race and their culture plays a role, right? So if I'm treating one specific person from a background, I want to know, like, what are you eating? What's your lifestyle? Like, you know, what's your family, like, you know, day to day? Because that's playing a role into maybe how they came to me in the first place, right? Like what's their ailment? So it's very interesting to see how race, religion, culture plays into their idea of, first of all, personal care and health, and what their idea of what healing means. And so I get to see that part, and I get to see like different people's backgrounds and their investment in their health and in their journey, right? Like in learning of themselves. So I often will find myself questioning, like, oh, well, why do you think you feel like that? Or like, what do you think this means for you? You know, or like, what is your day-to-day routine? And it will tie into, you know, just what their normal is, which is, again, always related back to what they were taught and what their little globe that they're living in.
Our society, our upbringing, our context, it's decisive, right? It's like, like you said, it is that bubble that raises us. And in mixed race, we've identified that maybe more than one bubble that we have in, or we expand our bubbles, right? I love that you know, the fact that I hear your commitment to health and to health, like education, almost like educating the self, educating and actually asking, like coaching, right? Like asking the right questions that really get to the source for people, to the root causes of their ailments, their medical, their physiological, you know, and ultimately mental, emotional spiritual needs. And it's starting with, what's your story?
Right.
And you've got that. So, you know, with that, what's your story? Where does that bring you? You said you're a health practitioner, right? You are specifically in PT. What, you know, as we're wrapping up here, as I said, like, what else do you see is something that you want to say, that you want to do, that, like, as far as the message, you started us off strong, like, like what you see is possible for the world, or what you stand for. And I'm really hearing your commitment for knowing yourself and getting to know yourself and taking good care of yourself. Yes. It's nice that, like, you know, that it sounds like you've chosen that passion that's important to you. Do you want to say, like, what about that lights you up, and how does that play into what you do now? Right?
Yeah. So I'm on this journey of just empowering people, especially in their health journey, but in addition to just empower them in knowing what they are fully capable of. So I myself am on this journey of peeling back the layers and doing the soul work and doing the shadow work, to really unveil my soul's purpose. But in that, a year after PT school, I started a health and wellness business. It's virtual. It is something that I never thought I would be doing. But in that journey, I'm able to grow as a female, as a person in society, in a leader, as a person in healthcare, in my relationships with my siblings, and, you know, as a daughter and as a girlfriend, etc. So it has helped me in that aspect, but it also has allowed me to dream bigger, right? So what do I see? So this health and wellness business is incredible in the potential and the solution that it can be. And, you know, I'm a pretty practical person. So if you want more, and if you need more, or you want to do more in life, right, you need to have more to be able to give more. So unfortunately, in society, we need money and we need time. And so, you know, in addition to PT, like, I knew right off the bat, like a year in, I was already like, I'm not going to be doing this for the rest of my life. This is not my full-time 40-year plan. And I knew that if I was going to make a global change, and yes, a dreamer, but practical, I needed to think outside the box. So this opportunity came into my lap. The company is Arbonne. I've been in it for 5 years. Like I said, it's grown me immensely, and it's given me so many more choices, so much more time. But what I see happening in the next few years is really having a holistic health center, whether it be virtual or in person, and have it, like, go into inner cities, and, you know, people that are not as privileged to get the education on what health is, and get the resources, have the clinicians in there, you know, from different disciplines, do like quick seminars, do a virtual seminar, do an assessment, and be able to give people education, right? Because education, knowledge is power. So, like, let's start there, so that when you go to the doctor, you're not just blindly doing what the doctor says because he knows better. So that's really my mission, like, really take ownership of your journey on this earth, mentally and physically, and doing the soul work. And the only way to do that is through education, through empowerment, through love, through community. So if I can get into communities and really speak life, that's it. Everything else will reveal itself.
Yes. Go ahead and say what you're going to say.
Yeah. And that's really, you know, who knows where that will take me beyond, but that's not it. You know, like, I want to be able to go to Africa and build homes if I wanted to for a month. I want to be able to travel the way that I want to travel. And I think that's the beauty of it, is that freedom is the ultimate win. And if you're able to do the things that you love, that's your purpose, like, you're winning in life, no matter what that is.
That is beautiful. Winning in life, no matter what that is. And I really hear you saying and speaking to getting into communities and speaking life.
Right.
And I really want to thank you for this time, because I know that's what you're about to do. I know you're about to get on another call and speak life in communities. And that really resonates with me. And I really honor and I see you. My soul sees you and loves you. And I'm telling you, when we get chills and when we vibe, it's like, I'm like, that really looks to be like a cooperative component in that. And that is why this Mixed Race Women's Collective is here to really have this, this is your opportunity to really have you speak life, and for all those watching and in this community to speak life into all of you. So I really, really, really appreciate you. This has been like so lovely and enlightening. I hope you enjoyed it too.
Yes.
I know we're wrapping up. So if there's any website or anything you want us to drop, or if you want people to find you on Facebook or Instagram, or you tell me, I can drop it in the chat right now. And I'll also let people know about where, if you're a mixed race woman too, you can join us, because Yasmin is one of our Mixed Race Women Collective members, which I really appreciate that you are.
Yeah.
So what can I tell people? Where can people be in touch with you or want to get in touch with you about, health and wellness, or if they just want to know more about your story?
Yeah. You can follow me on Instagram. I would say I'm the most active there. So it's yasmin.abdulhadi_.
The underscore afterwards, right? You said?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it looks like this. Tell me if it's correct. It looks like, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so if you want to follow Yasmin, you make sure you can follow her there. I'll make sure I'm following you there too, because I know we're on Facebook. But that's awesome. And also, as always, ladies, gentlemen, everyone, remember that if you are interested in sharing this with a mixed race woman, or you are one and you want to be featured on the web series like this too, and go live and share your story, please come to Mixed Race Women. You request to join, you answer membership questions, and I'll be in touch with you shortly about what that could look like for you to contribute to our group. So I want to thank you once again, Yasmin, so much. Have a fantastic weekend.
Thank you so much.
Lots of love to you, and I'll see you.
Thank you for starting this group. It's so appreciated.
Oh my gosh. And thank you for being you. I come to Yasmin when I want to really talk like health and wellness, and I come to you. So thank you for being that light for people in the world.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody. It was so nice talking with you all.
Yeah, bye.